Welcome to Meaning in Mythos, where we explore the stories we tell through myth, legend, and modern media, and what they reveal about the human experience. Grief is one of the oldest forces in storytelling, from Demeter's endless search for Persephone, to Odin's sorrow for Balder, to the countless warriors mourned in song. Grief defines our myths and shapes our heroes. In God of War 2018 and its sequel Ragnarök, grief is not just a theme, the driving force of the narrative. In the first seconds of the game, we see Kratos cutting down a tree to use for his wife's funeral pyre. Grief permeates the world from the beginning. This video is an explanation of how grief shapes God of War, how it defines Kratos, Atreus, Freya, and the world they inhabit. How it transforms, not just as a burden, but as a forge. Let's begin. The story of God of War begins in loss. Faye's death is not just a catalyst, it's the thread that binds father and son, forcing them to embark on a journey neither is ready for. What's striking is how little we know about Faye at first. Her presence is felt in absence. The trees she marked, the axe she wielded, and the instructions she left. Her death shapes everything, yet it's her memory that haunts the story. For Kratos, her loss stirs old ghosts, the family he once murdered, and the life he fled. We see it in his silence at the pyre, the way he almost touches Atreus, then pulls back. He cannot speak the grief, so he carries it in his body. Atreus' grief is different. He aches to understand. Who was she? Why did she choose this path for us? The journey to scatter her ashes becomes a pilgrimage of mourning, each step an encounter with pain and purpose. Grief is not a detour in their story. It is the story, and Faye's absence becomes the map they must follow. Kratos is a character defined by loss, and by the ways he has tried, and often failed, to carry that grief. In God of War 2018, we meet a man who has already lost everything. His first family in Greece, Lysandra and Calliope, his homeland, and now Faye. Yet Kratos is not a man who talks about grief. His body carries it, his silence echoes with it, but his words? Rare. His mantra, "Don't be sorry, be better," is not a dismissal of pain. It is a survival strategy. For Kratos, to feel is dangerous. To grieve is to risk being consumed by rage as he was in Greece. So he hardens himself, shields his heart even from his son. We see this in small, devastating moments, like previously mentioned, the way he reaches for Atreus at the pyre, but stops short. The way he watches Atreus cry over Fenrir, his face clenched in helplessness. The way he stares at the Leviathan axe, Faye's axe, as if it's the only tether he has to love, and yet he can barely hold it. Kratos loves, but he cannot show it. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too much. This is what makes Kratos so different from the gods of myth. In Greek mythology, grief often leads to vengeance. Think of Achilles after Patroclus, or Hera's endless fury over Zeus's betrayals. Kratos knows this pattern. He lived it in Greece, where his grief became a weapon that destroyed not only his enemies, but also himself. And so, in Midgard, he tries a different path: repression. But repression is not healing. The Norns confront him with the truth. They say, "You seek control because you fear the chaos of grief." And it's true. Kratos tries to control Atreus' choices, to shield him from prophecy, to deny the reality of loss. But grief, by its nature, is chaotic. It demands to be felt. And in trying to suppress it, Kratos risks repeating the cycle, becoming the very monster he fears. The breakthrough comes when Atreus, who had just seen innocent Midgardians die in the wake of their siege on Asgard, began consoling himself with his father's old advice: close your heart to it. Kratos notices this faulty reasoning, his own reasoning, and flips it on its end, showing the emotional transformation taking place in him.
I was wrong, Atreus. I was wrong. Open your heart. Open your heart to their suffering. That is your mother's wish. And mine as well. Today, we will be better.
These are the words of a man finally learning that grief is not weakness. It is a teacher. His humility is not just for Atreus. It is an admission that his old ways, his silence, his stoicism, have been born not of strength, but of fear. And then there is the prophecy wall. Kratos sees an image he never expected. Himself, honored as a god of peace, a protector, not feared, but loved. This is not the ghost of Sparta. This is a man who has carried grief and chosen to let it forge him into something new. When Kratos embraces Atreus near the end, the words barely spoken, "I am proud of you," carry the weight of everything he's been afraid to say. It is a release of grief, a quiet admission that love is worth the risk of loss. Kratos' journey teaches us that grief, when denied, can poison, but when faced, when carried with honesty and humility, it becomes a forge. It shapes us, tempers us, and allows us to become something more. Strength is not the absence of grief. Strength is the courage to love, knowing that grief will come, and choosing to love anyway. If Kratos' grief is a burden he tries to bury, Atreus' grief is a fire that refused to be contained. From the very first moments of God of War, Atreus carries the weight of loss in a way that's raw, visible, and unfiltered. His mother's death is the event that shatters the world he knew. It's not just the loss of her presence, it's the loss of her stories, her teachings, the answers to the questions that kept him awake at night. When he asks Kratos, what was she like? The silence he receives in return is a second kind of grief, the grief of unanswered questions. He aches to know her, to understand who she was, and why she named him Loki. And in the absence of answers, he looks outward to the world, to the giants, to prophecy itself. His grief manifests not as stoicism, but as action, sometimes reckless, sometimes brave. When Fenrir dies, we see the tenderness of his grief.
You're a good boy. A brave boy. Fast and strong. But you can rest now.
The way he holds Fenrir's head in his lap, whispering, "It's okay, boy, you're free now," is a moment of vulnerability that Kratos struggles to express. Atreus allows himself to feel, to mourn openly without shame. But grief also drives him toward risk. His search for meaning leads him to Asgard, to Odin, to choices that endanger himself and others. He's not just seeking answers, he's trying to take control of a story that feels written for him. The murals of prophecy, the whispers of destiny, they haunt him, pushing him to ask, am I Atreus or am I Loki? What does it mean to be either? Along the way, Atreus builds relationships that shape his understanding of grief. With Sindri and Brock, he finds a family outside of his own, a connection that makes Brock's death all the more devastating. When Sindri pulls away in his grief, rejecting Atreus' attempt to comfort him, it's a hard lesson that grief can isolate, and that love does not always shield us from loss. With Angerboda, Atreus finds something else, a peer who understands the weight of destiny and the burden of knowing too much too soon. Their bond is not just a friendship, it's a quiet understanding that grief, while heavy, can be shared. Together they explore the giant's legacy, and in that exploration, Atreus begins to see that his story is not just one of loss, but of possibility. The name Loki, given to him by Faye, becomes the focal point of this transformation. At first, it is a source of confusion, even fear. He resists it, asking, "Why would she name me that?" But at the end, we see a shift. In the mural scene, when Atreus reaches out to trace the name Loki, there is no longer fear in his eyes. There is acceptance. Not because he fully understands what it means, but because he realizes it is his to define. Grief has shaped him, but it does not own him. In his farewell to Kratos, Atreus remarks, "I need to find my own way now." This is not a rejection, but an act of love. It is a recognition that grief has taught him the value of connection, but also the necessity of independence. Atreus' journey is a reminder that grief is not only about what we have lost, but about who we become because of that loss. It teaches us to reach for others, even when we fear rejection. It shows us that identity is not something we inherit, but something we forge. And it reveals that sometimes the only way forward is to step into the unknown, to carry our grief, but not let it define us. Atreus chooses to keep loving, to keep reaching, even in the face of loss. We can see this in his relationship with Angerboda, his time spent with Thrud, and even in his attitude toward Thor at the end. That is his transformation. Love is his transformation. Freya's story is perhaps the clearest picture of grief's dual nature, its power to destroy and its potential to redeem. After Baldur's death, Freya is consumed by rage. Her grief becomes a storm, literal and emotional, that blinds her to everything else. Her curse over Kratos, "I will never forgive you. You have taken everything from me," is the raw cry of a mother who has lost the only thing that mattered. But grief is not static. In Ragnarök, we see Freya's long, painful process of transformation. Isolated in Vanaheim, she mourns, she rages, but slowly, she chooses something different.
Now that you have what you seek,
I suppose this is the point where I forgive you, where I kill you.
have you decided?
To be honest, I don't think I can do either. There's still a part of me that is so angry that it'll always be. It'll always be angry. But no. You are not the one who needs to die.
We can't change the past, but we can choose how we carry it. That choice is Freya's arc. She could remain consumed by vengeance, or she can let grief teach her something new. Compassion, resilience, even forgiveness. When Freya fights alongside Kratos, it's not because her grief is gone. It's because she's learned to carry it. Her grief is still a scar, but it no longer defines her. And in choosing to fight for life, she honors Baldur's memory in a new way. Freya's story is a reminder. Grief doesn't disappear, but it can evolve. Grief in God of War is not confined to individuals. It sweeps into the very bones of the world. The Norse cosmos is a tapestry woven from loss. Every prophecy, every cycle, every tale bears the imprint of grief. Ragnarök itself is not simply an apocalypse. It is a story born from grief. The death of Balder, the mourning of a mother, the rage of a father, the collapse of worlds. It is the inevitable culmination of cycles long in motion. Loss birthing vengeance, vengeance birthing destruction, and destruction leading inexorably to rebirth. The Norns speak this fatalism plainly.
You are the sum of your choices, nothing more. And because your choices never change, you will learn that Heimdall intends to kill your son in Asgard, and you will do what you do best. And then Ragnarok.
All threads are woven, the pattern is set. This is the voice of inevitability, a worldview that says grief is destiny, that suffering is unavoidable, and that we are powerless in the face of cosmic design. But Kratos resists this. His quiet words, "We make our own choices," are a rebellion, a declaration that even if the threads are woven, we are not bound to walk them blindly. His defiance is not a denial of grief, but a refusal to let grief dictate the terms of his life. The mural at the end of Ragnarök offers a new vision. Kratos, not as the ghost of Sparta, a destroyer feared by gods and mortals, but as a father, a protector, a god honored for what he chose to build, not what he destroyed. This story is not just myth. It is deeply intrinsic to our humanity. In our world, too, we are told stories of inevitability, of cycles we cannot break, of histories we are doomed to repeat. We inherit grief through the generations, grief from wars fought long before we were born, from losses that echo across time. Like Kratos, we stand in the shadow of systems that tell us, this is just how it is. Violence breeds violence. Loss begets loss. Grief is your inheritance. But God of War dares to ask, what if it doesn't have to be that way? What if grief, instead of a chain that binds us, can become a bridge, a way to connect with others, to transform the stories we tell about who we are, and to shape the world we leave behind? We see this in the final image, Kratos and Atreus walking side by side, no longer defined by prophecy, but by the choices they have made, together. We see it when Kratos accepts that love is worth the risk of loss, when Atreus chooses to carry his mother's name, Loki, not as a burden, but as a part of who he is becoming. The lesson here is not that grief disappears, but that we can choose how we carry it. We can let it crush us, paralyze us, make us bitter, or we can let it forge us into people who love deeper, who forgive more freely, who refuse to let the past write our entire future. God of War teaches us that grief is inevitable, yes, but fatalism is a lie. The threads may be woven, but the pattern is ours to shape. Grief in God of War is not a single event, nor a fleeting emotion. It is the thread that weaves together love, loss, and the journey forward. For Kratos, grief becomes a teacher. It shows him that true strength is not found in rage or control, but in the courage to love despite pain. For Atreus, grief becomes a forge, shaping him into a young man who chooses his own path, even in the shadow of loss. For Freya, grief is a fire that burns, but ultimately clears the ground for something new. And for all of them, for gods and mortals alike, grief is a testament. It is the cost of love, the price of connection, the shadow cast by the light of what we hold dear. As Faye reminds us,
the culmination of love is grief. And yet we love, despite the inevitable. We open our hearts to it. To grieve deeply is to have loved fully. Open your heart to the world as you have opened it to me, and you will find every reason to keep living in it.
That is the myth at the heart of God of War. That grief is not the end of the story. It is the proof that we have loved, and the beginning of something new. Thank you for watching Meaning in Mythos. Until next time, may your stories be rich, your grief a bridge, and your path one of love and hope.